Welcome to FolkFear. In the forgotten corners of Asia, where mist clings to mountain roots and whispers echo through rice fields, there are stories the elders refuse to write down. Tales of ancestral vows never fulfilled, of weddings held in silence beneath moonless skies, of coffins that bloom when the dead are hungry. Tonight, we invite you to listen to one of those stories. It comes from a village carved into the bones of old stone, a place where the tree that drinks the blood moon has stood for generations, where the living wear red and the dead wait patiently for their bride, where names are forgotten until they are called again beneath the veil. This is not just a ghost story. This is a curse passed from mother to daughter, sealed in wood and thread. This is the tale of the wedding under the coffin tree. The bus coughed smoke into the fog as it climbed the last stretch of the mountain road. Jin Lan sat by the window, her reflection trembling in the glass, framed by the green of endless bamboo. The air outside looked heavy, wet, like it carried secrets that refused to drift away. Her phone had lost signal hours ago. Even the GPS arrow had vanished somewhere between two nameless hills. The driver, a man whose eyes seemed older than his face, had not spoken a word since they left the last town. When the road narrowed into dirt and the forest pressed in, he finally muttered, "After this bend, the road ends. You walk from there. The villagers don't like strangers staying past sundown." Jin Lan nodded politely, clutching the strap of her backpack, though his words lingered like smoke in her chest. She was used to warnings like these. Superstition lived everywhere she went, an invisible net woven through Asia's rural veins. But this one felt different. It was not fear of spirits she heard in his voice. It was respect, like someone remembering a debt long unpaid. When the bus rolled to a stop, the world fell quiet. No cicadas, no wind, only the faint hiss of cooling metal. She stepped down into a sea of mist and watched the bus disappear into it, tail lights blinking twice before they were swallowed whole. Ahead of her lay a dirt path. At its end stood the gate of Haishan village, carved from dark wood, the paint so faded it was almost colorless. A weathered plaque hung crooked above the archway, etched with the old characters for peaceful rest. Someone had drawn a red line through the word rest. She smiled faintly, pulling out her camera to film the entrance. She whispered her usual opening line. Day 1, Haishan Village, Guangdong Province, known locally as the resting place of the coffin tree. Locals claim it blooms only once every 50 years under a blood moon. I'm here to document its rituals and oral history before they vanish forever. She lowered the camera and took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet soil and smoke, faintly metallic, like rusted incense burners. The first villager she met was an old woman sweeping the stone steps outside a narrow house. Her gray hair was tied in a bun, her eyes half closed from the years. When she saw Jin Lan, the broom froze mid-air. "You came from the city?" the woman asked. "Yes," Jin Lan replied softly. "I'm studying ancestral customs. May I ask about—" But the woman had already turned away, muttering in dialect, something that sounded like, "Not again." Further down the lane, children played with paper boats in a puddle. They stopped when she approached. One of them whispered her name, not miss, not teacher, her actual name, She blinked. "Do you know me?" The children said nothing. They only pointed toward the north hill, where a dark crown of branches rose above the fog. Even from afar, the coffin tree towered over the village like a monument built for the dead. Its trunk was black and split, its roots thick as serpents that disappeared into graves. At dusk, she reached the guest house arranged for her stay, an old Hakka roundhouse with an inner courtyard. A kind woman named Madame Yu greeted her, smiling too widely. "You must be tired. We prepared a room for you. Not many come here anymore." Inside, the walls were lined with ancestral portraits, men and women in funeral robes, their faces blurred by candle smoke. On a small altar rested bowls of uncooked rice, burned incense, and a single red ribbon folded neatly like an offering. "Your research," Madame Yu said, setting down a cup of tea. "You came for the tree?" I nodded. "It says it blooms only once every 50 years. Madame Yu's smile faltered. "It blooms when it wants something." Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere behind the hills. The tea in her cup rippled, sending tiny rings across its surface. That night, she reviewed her footage by candlelight. The frames looked perfect until she reached the shot of the village gate. The image shook once, then blurred into static. For half a second, she thought she saw a red shape behind her reflection, a silhouette draped in fabric standing under the archway. She replayed the clip. The shape was gone. At midnight, unable to sleep, she stepped out into the courtyard. The fog had thickened into a pale river. The moon hid behind clouds, but the outline of the coffin tree was still visible in the distance, a black wound against the sky. She lifted her camera again, zooming in on the branches. They were bare, lifeless, until something shimmered near the crown. It looked like a flower. It opened slowly, soundlessly, like skin tearing underwater. Its petals were the color of old blood. She lowered the camera, her breath clouding in the cold air. The village was silent, but somewhere beyond the mist, she heard the faint, rhythmic beat of drums. Not lively drums, funeral drums. She turned toward the sound, and the fog parted just enough for her to see lanterns moving through the trees. Figures walked behind them, each carrying something on their shoulders. A coffin. She stumbled back into the courtyard, pressing against the wall. The procession passed the gate, feet leaving no prints in the mud. Their faces were hidden by veils, and every hand was bound by a single red thread that glowed faintly in the dark. The drums stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, like the pause between heartbeats. Then, from far away, a voice whispered, soft, almost tender. "Welcome home, Red Bride." Jin Lan's flashlight flickered once and died. When dawn came, she told herself it had been exhaustion, the mind playing tricks. But when she checked her camera again, the final frame showed something she had not filmed. The coffin tree, fully bloomed, its roots glistening wet, and beneath it, a small wooden coffin with her name carved on the lid. Morning arrived gray and weightless. The mist had not lifted. It had only settled closer to the ground, as if the village were sinking into it. Jin Lan stepped outside, camera in hand, determined to treat the night before as nothing more than exhaustion. The scholar in her demanded proof. The woman in her simply wanted reassurance that the world was still logical. The streets were empty except for the stray dogs sleeping near the well. Their ears twitched, but they did not bark. Every house had its doors shut, its curtains drawn. On the doors, she noticed symbols written in cinnabar, protective charms smeared and faded. At one threshold, a red ribbon hung across two nails, stretched tight like a boundary. Madame Ye found her standing there and said softly, "Don't cross those. The red keeps them out." "Who?" Jin Lan asked. The woman smiled without meeting her eyes. "The ones who don't know they're gone." She forced a small laugh, recording the moment. "Is that part of the local belief system?" But Madame Yue had already turned away, pretending not to hear. Later that day, Jin Lan visited the small ancestral shrine at the center of the village. Inside, smoke pooled thickly beneath the roof. Wooden tablets lined the altar, each etched with names burned half away by time. She pressed record on her camera and began a soft narration. Shrine of Heishan Village. Tablets appear to date back at least 2 centuries. Each bears posthumous titles. Some are missing, possibly removed during the Cultural Revolution. Her voice steadied her until she noticed something strange. One of the tablets bore her grandmother's maiden name, carved deep into the wood but recently polished. Jin Lan Yue. Her grandmother had never spoken of her birthplace. She'd told everyone she was from a riverside town near Guangzhou, not a mountain village hidden from maps. But the surname, the given name, it was unmistakable. Jin Lan reached out to trace the character for Yue. The surface was still warm. That night, the whispering began. At first, she thought it was the wind pressing through cracks in the walls, but the words formed syllables, soft, deliberate, familiar. Her name, spoken by many voices at once. She sat up in bed, her camera blinking red in standby mode. The whispering stopped. Then, faintly, from the hallway, a child's giggle. She opened the door. The corridor was empty except for the flicker of an oil lamp. A small paper boat floated slowly along the floorboards, moving as if pushed by invisible water. On its side, written in ink, was her name again, Jin Lan. She followed it to the courtyard. The fog had thickened into silver sheets. Somewhere in it, someone was humming, a woman's voice, old and cracked. The tune was simple, a wedding melody she recognized from her grandmother's cassette recordings. Her hand shook as she lifted the camera. The lens caught the faint outline of a figure sitting at the edge of the well. The woman's back was turned, hair undone, white dress fluttering like torn paper. She whispered, "Hello?" The humming stopped. The figure turned slightly, revealing half a face, blurred, colorless, and a mouth moving soundlessly. Then the camera died. When she replayed the footage later, there was nothing. No woman, no fog, no sound. Only her own voice whispering her name again and again, layered over itself like an echo trapped in glass. The next morning, she went to find the village elder, an old man everyone called Uncle Liang, said to be the last keeper of the ancestral records. His house sat at the far edge of the rice fields, roof sagging under moss. He greeted her with suspicion, but invited her in, his hands trembling slightly as he poured tea. "I'm researching the Coffin tree and the rituals around it," Jin Lan explained. Liang's eyes flickered. "You should leave before the moon turns red." "I'm just documenting." "The tree doesn't want to be documented." He leaned closer, voice low. "Do you know why they call it the coffin tree? Because every time it blooms, it needs a bride. Always a bride. Always someone bound by blood." She felt the air thicken. Bound by blood. He nodded. Your grandmother came from here. She was meant to be the bride 50 years ago. Jin Lan froze. That's impossible. The old man smiled sadly. Impossible things keep this village alive. When she left his house, the sky had turned the color of ash. Children were again by the puddle, folding paper boats, humming the same song. She crouched beside them. Where did you learn that melody? One child whispered, The bride sang it to us. What bride? The boy pointed toward the northern hill. The one under the tree, the one waiting for you. That night, Jin Lan dreamed of a woman in red standing beneath the coffin tree, face hidden by a veil. In her hands, she held a string of red thread that stretched across the mountains, tightening around Jin Lan's wrists. When she woke, there were faint red marks on her skin, as if the dream had been real. She looked at her camera on the table. Its indicator light was on, though she had not touched it. The lens was recording, pointed at the door. On the screen, she saw herself sleeping, and behind her, a shadow bending low, whispering her name. The days in Haishan moved like fog, shapeless, slow, and silent. Jin Lan wandered the village like someone trapped in a dream, her steps soft against the stone paths, her camera always cradled in her hands like a protective charm. But protection here was fragile. Everywhere she turned, doors closed, conversations stopped. Even the wind held its breath when she passed. Yet the red thread was everywhere, tied to door handles, trees, window grills, looped delicately like veins winding through the village. She followed the thread one morning to the small library housed inside an abandoned school. The building leaned slightly to one side, its roof eaten by rot. The books inside were swollen from dampness, their spines broken like old backs. She sifted through them with gloved fingers, camera recording her whispered commentary. Hashan's village archives. Most materials predate 1965. There are references here to offerings, ancestral rites, and marriage customs, but much of it's been torn out, censored maybe, or erased by someone who knew what should not be remembered. Behind a stack of yellowed scrolls, she found an old registry wrapped in wax paper. The cover was faded red, and the characters for marriage records were barely visible. Inside, pages were filled with neat calligraphy, arranged names, dowries, binding dates. Her breath caught when she found it. Chen Lian Yue, her grandmother, age 19, spouse Liang Shen, status spirit marriage approved. There was no death certificate attached, no mourning notation, only a red thumbprint where the signature should have been. Jin's fingers trembled as she turned the page, only to find something more terrifying. Her own name. Jin Lan, age 23, spouse Liang Shen, status pending ceremony. The ink was still wet. She slammed the book shut. Outside, the wind moaned low through the trees. A flock of birds scattered upward from the coffin tree, their wings loud like thunder in the silence. Back in the roundhouse, Madame Yue acted as if nothing was unusual. She served rice congee and bitter tea. And when Jean confronted her with the ledger, the older woman simply said, "Blood remembers. You were always going to come back." "Who is Liang Shen?" she demanded. "He's been dead for 50 years. How can my name be listed next to his?" But Madame Yue only looked away, eyes growing glassy. He never declared dead, because his soul never left. The story came slowly, piece by piece, like ashes drifting after a fire. Liang Shen was the only son of the original shaman family in Haishan, brilliant, reserved, and gifted in Taoist incantations. At the age of 18, he became obsessed with the soul-binding rituals passed down through his bloodline. He studied ways to preserve the spirit, to tether it to the living world. He believed death was a pause, not a door. He chose Chen Liliang Yue to be his bride, but before the ceremony could be completed, he was found dead in the shrine, his body intact, eyes open, and lips curved in a faint smile. But no one believed he had died naturally. The villagers whispered of a forbidden ritual gone wrong, that he had tried to transfer his soul into another vessel. Some said he had succeeded. Others said he had cursed the entire village. The wedding was cancelled, and Chen Liliang Yue disappeared that same night. No one ever found her, but the coffin tree began to bloom again the next moon. Red petals, rotting roots, a scent like perfume mixed with decay. The village elder, Uncle Yang, once claimed he saw Liang Shen's shadow moving under the tree, pacing like a groom abandoned at the altar. "That's why we keep the marriage alive," Madame Yue whispered. "He never left. He's still waiting for his bride." Jean stared at her, heart pounding. "Why my name?" "Because she ran, and blood never forgets a broken vow." That night, Jean dreamed of a shrine lit with 100 candles, their flames flickering inside bowls of dark water. A man sat in the center, wearing a black Taoist robe and a wedding crown made of bone. His face was pale, untouched by time, and when he smiled, his teeth were too white. "You came back," he said, voice like silk unraveling. "This time, you won't run." She woke choking, the bedsheets twisted tight around her wrists like rope. Her camera, once again, had recorded on its own. She played back the footage with shaking hands. The frame showed her sleeping. Then, slowly, a shadow emerged from the wall behind her. It leaned down and brushed her cheek with something cold and gray, whispered, "Soon," and vanished when the candle beside the bed blew out without wind. She shut the camera off. She didn't sleep again that night. Outside, the coffin tree shed a single petal, and it floated through the village like a drop of blood looking for flesh. The blood moon rose slow and swollen, casting the entire village in a bruised red hue. Jin Lan stood at the threshold of the shrine, heart hammering against her ribs. The camera dangled around her neck, heavier than usual, as if weighed down by something unseen. She had not planned to go out after nightfall, but something had pulled her here. Not fear, not curiosity, obligation. She heard it first, the drums, deep, hollow, rhythmic, not celebratory, ceremonial. She moved through the village like a ghost among ghosts. Every house had its lantern extinguished. Only the shrine burned with light, rows of red candles flickering like 1,000 watching eyes. The smell of incense mixed with iron hung thick in the air. She pressed herself into the shadows beside a broken wall and raised her camera. In the clearing before the shrine, villagers stood in a perfect circle. Each wore a white mourning robe. Each held a folded paper figure, delicate, human-shaped, and clothed in red silk. In the center stood Uncle Lang, his face painted in black and white ink, eyes hidden beneath a Taoist veil. He held a wooden staff tied with strands of red thread and rooster feathers, chanting in an old dialect that Jin struggled to follow. From his throat came the invocation. "We offer form for spirit, red thread for bond, ash for memory. Let the gate open, let the bride awaken." The paper brides were laid gently on the ground, one by one, in a spiraling pattern like a flower in bloom. Jin counted them, 7 in total. But there were only 6 villagers in the circle. The 7th figure, she realized, must represent someone not present, or someone chosen. The drums fell silent. The villagers stepped back as Uncle Lang approached the paper figures with a long, smoldering stick. He whispered words into the smoke and touched flame to silk. The paper brides ignited, not violently, but in a slow, curling dance of fire. Their red veils melted like skin, and in the smoke, a shape moved. A woman's silhouette stepped forward. Tall, rigid, wearing red, her face veiled, her hands bound in thread, her feet made no sound against the stone. Jin's camera screen flickered. The figure turned its head toward her, and in that moment the camera shorted out, static, black, gone. Jin ducked behind the wall, chest heaving, hand over her mouth. The figure hadn't followed her, not with feet, but she felt it. The pressure of something looking at her without eyes, the weight of recognition. She waited until the ritual ended. When she returned to her room, she found the window open, the curtain gently swaying in the windless air. On her pillow sat a folded paper effigy, smaller than the others, clothed in red. Its face was blank, but someone had written her name in calligraphy down its chest. Jin backed away, whispering, "No, no, no, no." The figure toppled over on its own. The next day, she confronted Madame Yue. "I saw everything, the ritual, the burning paper brides. What was that? What was watching me?" "You were not supposed to see that." "I'm already part of it. You know I am. Tell me the truth." Madame Yue sat down, eyes heavy with sorrow. "There are some who believe the spirit cannot enter the world without a vessel, so we make one. We fold paper, we dress it, we burn it. And what happens next? Sometimes the spirit accepts the offering, sometimes it needs more. And when it needs more," she looked away, "it finds its own bride." That night, Jin tried to leave. She packed in silence, every zip and snap feeling too loud in the small room. She left behind her equipment, all of it. Only her grandmother's letter, now stained and wrinkled, remained in her jacket pocket. She reached the bus stop at the edge of the village before midnight. The road stretched into darkness, but no lights approached. She waited, minutes, an hour. Then, from behind, she heard it again. The drums, but softer now, fainter, not from the shrine, from the forest. She turned and saw lanterns flickering through the trees, the same slow procession, the same red thread swinging gently from wrists, and at the front of the line walked a bride, not paper, not folded, real. She wore a red qipao embroidered in black thread. Her feet were bare, dragging through the dirt, and beneath her veil, Jin saw only darkness. She ran. The path twisted beneath her feet, turned back toward the village no matter how many turns she made. Branches clawed at her clothes, her breath came in ragged sobs, and still the drums beat behind her, soft, insistent, like a heartbeat she could not stop. When she collapsed outside the roundhouse, dawn had already come. The red thread had returned, tied in a delicate loop around her door, waiting. Morning came without warmth. The sky above Haishan village was pale and hollow, as though the clouds themselves had forgotten how to hold sunlight. Jin Lan sat in the courtyard, staring at the thin red thread tied to her door. It fluttered softly in the still air, undisturbed by wind or touch. She hadn't slept. Not after the procession, not after the drums, not after she saw her own name folded into paper and set aflame. She touched the mark on her wrist where the thread had brushed her skin. It hadn't bruised, but it tingled with a low throb, like something under the surface had awakened. She tried to leave again, this time on foot, backpack slung over her shoulders, boots laced tight. She followed the road out past the rice paddies, through the low bamboo groves. The path seemed clear, logical, concrete. But when she reached the crossroads where the bus had dropped her off, the sign was gone. The road split in three, each one identical. The markings she remembered, an old billboard, a rusted bicycle chained to a post, had disappeared. She chose a direction at random and walked for 2 hours. Her GPS still refused to load. When she finally saw buildings again, her heart lifted, until she realized she had returned to Haishan village. Back to the gate, back to the plaque, back to the faded word rest slashed through in red. Jin Lan stood frozen, lips parted in disbelief. Her breath fogged in front of her, though the day was not cold. The village didn't want her to leave. Later, inside her room, she unpacked her bag with stiff, deliberate movements. Her camera was still there, untouched. But when she turned it on, the screen blinked once and displayed a photograph she hadn't taken. It was of her, wearing a red veil, standing under the coffin tree. She stared at the image, heart pounding. It was detailed, high resolution, nothing like the footage she had captured. In the photo, her hands were folded in front of her, and her eyes, visible through the sheer fabric, were closed in peace. She deleted it, then checked the memory card. It was there again. Same image, same timestamp, but this time her eyes were open and staring directly into the lens. That night, she found red thread woven through everything she owned, her boots, her toothbrush, the collar of her coat. At first it was only 1 or 2 strands, but by midnight it was everywhere, tied in loops, knots, symbols she didn't recognize. At dawn she snapped. She stormed through the village, banging on doors. No one answered. Even the dogs had vanished. She returned to Uncle Liang's house, demanding answers. "You said he never left. Liang Shen, the groom. What does he want from me?" The old man didn't look surprised. He merely poured her tea and said, "A vow once broken must be sealed again. I never made any vow, but your blood did." He pulled out a faded photograph from a wooden box. It showed a girl in a red dress standing beside the coffin tree, holding the hand of a man with no face. The girl looked like Jin, younger, paler, but undeniably her. "It was meant to be your grandmother," he said. "But she ran, she cursed the bond, and when a thread is snapped, it must find the next one in the bloodline." Jin felt dizzy. "No, I don't believe this. This is folklore, myth." Uncle Yang's gaze sharpened. Then tell me why your name is already carved in the coffin beneath the tree." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she returned to the shrine. The doors creaked open without touch. Inside, the air was thick with incense and rot. She descended the narrow stairs behind the altar, steps she had never seen before, hidden behind a red curtain. At the bottom was a small underground chamber, lit only by a single flame in a brass bowl, and at the center, a coffin. Small, unmarked at first, but as she drew closer, her eyes adjusted to the grain of the wood. Her name was there, carved deep, the characters Jin Lan, still wet with fresh lacquer. Her hand reached out involuntarily, trembling above the lid. Something moved inside. She stumbled back, heart thudding against her ribs. From behind she heard the sound of footsteps, slow, measured, approaching. A voice, warm and quiet, spoke behind her. "You look beautiful in red." She turned. No one was there. The chamber was empty. But when she returned upstairs, she saw herself in the shrine's polished mirror. She was wearing a red wedding veil. She tore it off, but the fabric clung to her fingers. It left stains, deep crimson, like dried blood. That night she tried to sleep. She locked the doors, blocked the windows, hid the camera. But when she awoke at midnight, she was standing under the coffin tree, barefoot, dressed in red. The tree had bloomed. Its petals were open wide. Its branches hung low like arms preparing to embrace her. She didn't remember walking there, didn't remember dressing. But in her hand was a folded paper groom, and in the distance, drums began again. She awoke with soil under her fingernails. Not dust, not dirt from the courtyard floor. Soil. Damp, rich, clinging to her palms as though she'd been digging. Or buried. Jin Lan sat up slowly in her bed, heart racing. Her sheets were stained with smudges of earth, the hem of her nightgown soaked. She checked the soles of her feet, mud caked in the arches, the kind found near roots or graves. She didn't scream, not this time. Fear had become too familiar. She just whispered, "It's getting worse." By noon, the sky had turned the color of parchment, thick and flat. The sun remained hidden, as if refusing to witness what the village had become, or what it had always been. Jin walked without her camera. There was no need to film what no one else would believe. The villagers did not stop her when she passed. They watched from windows and thresholds, eyes glassy and still. Children no longer played in the puddles. Dogs no longer barked. The red threads were gone, but in their place, petals had begun to fall. Crimson, soft and fleshy, they drifted down from the northern hill like gentle rain. The coffin tree was in full bloom now, its canopy heavy with flowers that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. She climbed the hill. No one followed. The wind died as she stepped beneath the first low branch. The trunk of the tree was massive, split down the middle like an open wound. Its bark was blackened, not by fire, but by rituals, incantations carved in spirals, burnt offerings sealed with wax, and threads woven through the knots like veins feeding the tree's hunger. At its base was a mound of earth, freshly turned. She didn't need to dig. The roots had already parted. The coffin was waiting. It wasn't ornate, no gilded carvings or lacquered finish, just aged wood, dark and worn, the grain raised like scars. But the name carved on the lid was unmistakable. Jin Lan. 2 characters, deep, still wet, still bleeding. Her knees buckled. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her fingers hovered over the lid. Something inside called to her, not in words, but in memory. A pull in her blood, her bones. Her grandmother's voice whispering from somewhere beyond the veil of time. "Don't open it." She stepped back. A sudden gust of wind pushed against her, hard. Leaves scattered, branches groaned. The coffin rocked once, then opened. Inside was a red veil, folded neatly. Beneath it, bones. Not all bones, just a jawbone with a thread of red still tied to the teeth. Jin turned and ran. She didn't stop until she reached the roundhouse. Madame Yue met her at the door, holding a basin of water. "You saw it," she said quietly. Jin nodded, trembling. The older woman sighed and placed the basin down. "It's almost time." "I don't want this. I'm not her. I didn't make any vow." "But she did. And the tree doesn't care who breaks the promise. It only wants balance." Jin sat beside the hearth, hands shaking. "What was that bone?" Madame Yue didn't answer at first. Then slowly she said, "The last bride who tried to run." The days that followed blurred together. She stopped eating, stopped recording. The villagers no longer spoke to her. Some wouldn't even look at her. Others bowed slightly when she passed, as if she were already dead. And in the night, he came. Not every night, but often enough that she no longer doubted his presence. He never entered through doors. He didn't need to. He stood in mirrors, at the foot of her bed, in the reflection of her tea, always wearing the same thing: a red robe, a funeral crown, a smile that never reached the eyes. Sometimes he said nothing. Other times he spoke as if they were already married. "You're quieter than your grandmother," he'd whisper. She screamed for days. On the 4th night, she gathered her strength and asked, "What do you want from me?" He tilted his head. "Only what was promised." "I never promised anything." His smile widened. "But you came, and that is enough." The next morning, she found the veil folded at the foot of her bed. Its silk was warm. She burned it. It didn't blacken, didn't curl. Instead, it shrieked, not with sound, but with air, space, memory. The room pulsed once, and all her windows cracked at once. The fire turned green, then extinguished itself. When the smoke cleared, the veil lay untouched in the ashes, waiting. That afternoon, she returned to the shrine. No one stopped her. She went down the stairs beneath the altar again, this time holding a lantern. The air had grown colder. The flame fluttered in panic. Inside the chamber, the coffin was gone. In its place stood a mirror tall and ancient, the frame carved with funeral script. She looked into it, saw herself in red. Her mouth opened, but her reflection didn't follow. Instead, it smiled and raised a bone-white hand toward the glass. Jin screamed. The mirror cracked. The reflection didn't shatter. It stepped closer, whispered, "The veil fits now." The sky bled. That was the only way Jin Lan could describe it. The moon rose not white nor golden, but a deep, bruised red, low and heavy, as if mourning. The clouds parted like pulled silk, revealing the swollen orb that cast its bleeding hue over every rooftop, every path, every leaf in Haishan village. It was the night of the ghost wedding, and she was the bride. She didn't remember how she had been dressed. The qipao fit perfectly, tight at the waist, embroidered with black thread in shapes she didn't recognize but instinctively feared. Her hair had been braided with red silk, her lips painted a color she hadn't chosen. The veil had returned, laid neatly on the foot of her bed again, no matter how many times she had burned it. This time, she didn't try to resist. There were no words left, no logic, no camera to record what no one would believe. Only silence, only footsteps. They came for her just after dusk, not in anger, not in haste, calm, reverent. Villagers in white mourning robes formed 2 quiet rows outside her door, each holding a lantern, each with their eyes lowered, not a procession of the living, but of the resigned. Madame Yue stood beside them, holding a single thread of red string between her palms. She didn't speak. She only bowed and gently tied the string around Jin's wrists. The thread was cool against her skin. Jin Lan followed. They led her through the village in complete silence, past the shrine, past the empty houses, past the still well where she thought she saw the paper boats again, only now they were black, folded neatly and floating without water. The coffin tree was waiting. Its branches swayed gently, though the air was still. The petals glistened in the red moonlight, open and trembling. Beneath it stood an altar built from stone slabs, old, moss-covered, and etched with names lost to time. On top of the altar sat a single coffin. Its lid had been removed. Inside was a figure, dressed in red robes, skin like dried paper, stretched tight over bone. The face was intact, almost peaceful. His hands rested on his chest, fingers curled around a red envelope sealed in wax. He wore a crown, black wood, shaped like the horns of an ox. His lips had been painted red, and though his eyes were closed, Jin felt him watching her. The Taoist priest, Uncle Liang, stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "Tonight we honor the vow that was broken. Tonight the thread shall be tied again. Tonight the bride walks into the world between." He handed Jin a lit candle, its flame flickering strangely in the moonlight. She was led in a circle around the coffin 3 times, once for body, once for soul, once for memory. Then she was brought before him, Liang Shen, her groom. Uncle Liang held the red envelope above her head. "Do you accept the union of your name to the spirit that lingers? Do you bind your thread to the one whose breath has ended?" The crowd waited. Jin said nothing. She didn't have to. The thread around her wrists tightened on its own. A drop of blood beaded at her palm. It sank into the ground like ink soaking through ancient paper. The priest smiled faintly. "The bond is accepted." A second thread was drawn from the groom's hand, crimson, aged, frayed, and tied to her own. The knot was sealed with a drop of wax from the candle she carried. Somewhere in the trees the drums began again, low, hollow, final. Uncle Liang stepped back. The villagers bowed. And then the corpse opened its eyes. They were not clouded, not rotted. They were black, still alive. Jin screamed, but no sound came from her mouth. The veil fell over her face, pulled by an invisible hand. Her knees buckled, her body moved without will, and the wind began to howl. The petals from the coffin tree lifted into the air, swirling like ash. The altar trembled, the coffin groaned, and beneath her skin, something shifted, like a hand pressing from the inside. She was still awake when they carried her down the hill, still aware when they locked her in the shrine, still breathing when the stone door sealed shut behind her. She sat in the darkness, her veil soaked with sweat, and in the blackness, a voice spoke softly, not from outside, from the coffin beside her. "Now you cannot leave."
The darkness inside the shrine was not just the absence of light. It was a presence, a thickness, a breath. Jin Lan sat against the cold stone floor, wrists still bound with red thread, her back pressed to the sealed wooden door. The air tasted like mold and dust, but beneath it was something worse, the faint metallic tang of blood that had dried long ago. The coffin beside her hadn't moved in hours, but she felt it watching, even without eyes. She couldn't scream. There was no one to hear her, and even if there were, what sound could undo a vow carved into wood and blood? She whispered to herself, not prayers, just her own name, again and again, like an anchor, like a spell. Jin Lan, Jin Lan, Jin Lan. Her voice cracked. She stopped. The candle had long since died, leaving her in pitch. And then, a sound. Not footsteps, not the shuffle of cloth or the groan of wood. Paper. Crisp, brittle, shifting. She turned toward the altar, its shape barely visible in the dim glow that leaked from a crack in the ceiling. Slowly, she crawled toward it. Her hand brushed something tucked between two loose stones, a bundle of cloth. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all sealed in yellowing envelopes, all signed in delicate calligraphy. Lan Yue, her grandmother. Jin's hands trembled as she opened the first. To the girl who finds this, I pray you are not like me. They chose me when I was only 17, said I was lucky, that I had been chosen by the tree, but I know now what they meant. I was not lucky, I was sentenced. The boy, Liang Shen, was gifted, touched by the spirits. They called him the future guardian of the veil. But he went too far. He wanted immortality. He wanted a bride who would walk with him between the worlds. I saw him in my dreams before the ceremony, standing at the base of the coffin tree, smiling without warmth. He promised he would wait forever. I believed it was just a nightmare. But he waited, and the tree remembered. Jin choked down a cry. Her eyes scanned the second letter. I ran. On the night of the red moon, I ran through the bamboo and never looked back. I left behind my name, my home, my blood. I thought I had escaped the vow, but I was wrong. They say the coffin tree binds not just the chosen, but the bloodline, that one must take my place, that the thread will pull until the knot is sealed. I've dreamed of you. I think you are my granddaughter, and if you are reading this, they have chosen you. Jin dropped the letter. Her breath came in shallow bursts. The walls seemed to close in tighter with every word. The coffin creaked softly, as if responding. She lit a match from the altar's base
and read the last letter. There is no way to stop the ritual. Only one way to survive it. You must finish the marriage. Let him believe it's real. Let the bond seal. And then, only then, can you break it. But only by offering someone else in your place. That is the price. One life for one life. I chose to run, and you were born to pay. Jin let the letter fall. She curled into herself, rocking gently, the red thread cutting deeper with each movement. One life for one life. She could still hear the voices from the village in her memory, the way the children whispered her name, the way Madame Yue's hands had trembled, the way the villagers had bowed, not out of reverence, but out of relief. They knew. They had all known. Jin's eyes burned. She reached into the cloth bundle again, and her fingers brushed something cold. She pulled it free. A mirror, the size of her palm, framed in wood carved with ritual script. She stared into it. At first, only darkness. Then, her own reflection. But it was not her. The figure wore the same red qipao, but the skin was ashen, the lips bloodless, and the eyes, they were not her eyes. They were his. A smile curled slowly across the reflection's face. And then he spoke, without sound. Say the vow, and I will let you live. She dropped the mirror. It cracked, but didn't shatter. From the coffin beside her, a whisper. The veil is waiting. The thread around her wrist tugged once, gently. And somewhere beyond the shrine walls, the drums began again. Slower this time. Final. The veil lay folded before her. Its silk glistened in the candlelight, delicate and impossibly red, like it had been soaked in something living. Jin Lan stared at it without blinking. She didn't need to touch it to feel it pulsing. It breathed with its own rhythm, a heartbeat outside of time. She whispered, I won't wear it. The shrine was silent, the air too still, but the thread around her wrist tightened as if warning her. She looked toward the cracked mirror from her grandmother's bundle. Her own face stared back now, tired, pale, eyes shadowed by something more than exhaustion. Say the vow, and I will let you live. That voice still echoing in her head, his voice, Liang Shen. He didn't threaten, he didn't beg, he waited. Jin stood slowly, her legs weak beneath her. The stone floor of the shrine was freezing, and her bare feet ached with every step, but her resolve had returned. She would end this. She would not become his bride, not even in death. She opened her backpack, fingers trembling, and pulled out the lighter she kept for emergencies. Its metal casing was cold but familiar, real. She placed the veil on the center of the floor, surrounding it with broken sticks from the coffin's base, old joss paper, and dried wax from discarded altar candles. A makeshift pyre. With a final breath, she flicked the flame to life and touched it to the edge of the veil. The silk curled instantly, blackening, writhing, screaming. Not from her imagination, screaming. A high, shrill sound rose from the flames, like hundreds of voices howling in agony. The room shook, candles blew out, the walls pulsed as if the shrine itself were alive and convulsing. Jin stumbled backward, clutching her ears. The veil refused to burn completely. It flared, then turned to smoke, thick, red and angry, spiraling into the air and forming a shape, a face. His face, Liang Shen. Mouth open, eyes wide, jaw unhinged in rage. The smoke shot toward her. She screamed, too late, and the heat engulfed her body. She collapsed to the ground, convulsing. Pain flooded her veins like fire, but there were no flames on her skin, no visible burns, only inside, where something twisted, as if something ancient and cruel was trying to hollow her out, to make space within her. The fire was not meant to destroy the veil, it was meant to punish her. When she came to, she was lying in the ashes. The veil was gone, but the red thread was still there, now tied tightly around her neck like a choker. She tried to pull it loose, it wouldn't budge. She sobbed, weak and broken. The shrine above groaned. From the far end of the chamber, a shadow moved. Not a person, a figure gliding toward her, dressed in red, face veiled. The silk didn't sway with movement. It floated like it existed in different air. Jin crawled backward, gasping, but the figure didn't come closer. It simply lifted its hand and pointed to the wall behind her. Jin turned. There, etched freshly into the stone, were 4 words written in her grandmother's hand. "Finish the vow first." She stared at the message, blinking through tears. The veil was not meant to be burned. It was part of the ritual, a binding, a lock on a door she wasn't supposed to open until it was too late. Now she had undone it early. Now there was no boundary, no order, just him and her, and the bond between them, raw, exposed, raging. The figure vanished. The shrine fell silent once more. But as she tried to sit up, a searing pain tore through her back. She reached over her shoulder. Her fingers came away wet. Blood. She twisted, found a mirror shard, and angled it behind her. There, etched into her flesh like a ritual brand, was the same Taoist symbol carved into the coffin tree. She cried out. The pain wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, a marking, not possession, preparation. He was carving her into a vessel, and there was no more time. The morning after the burning brought no light, not even the illusion of it. Jin Lan woke to a red mist leaking through the cracks of the shrine door. It wasn't fog, it was heavier, almost oily in how it clung to the floor, curling up the stone steps like tendrils, reaching, sensing. She tried to stand, but her legs gave beneath her. The pain from the night before still radiated in her back, the brand etched into her skin raw and pulsing, like it throbbed in time with something else, something not hers. She crawled toward the altar and sat against the cold wall, breathing slowly, counting the seconds between each breath just to keep herself tethered. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then she saw him. Not as a whisper, not as a shadow, not in a reflection. He was simply there, standing at the foot of the stairs, beneath the mouth of the shrine, where the red mist coiled around his feet. Liang Shen. He was not a corpse. Not anymore. His body was whole, tall, clothed in ceremonial red with silver embroidery so intricate it shimmered. His long black hair was tied back with red ribbon, and on his brow rested the black wood wedding crown of a Taoist spirit master. But it was his face that stole her breath. It was perfect. Not beautiful, not grotesque, perfect in the most inhuman way. Unmoving, ageless, his eyes black as ink, with no whites, just endless, depthless voids, and beneath them no fatigue, no sorrow, just stillness. A doll carved from memory. He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying her, or remembering her from somewhere she'd never been. "You tried to burn the veil," he said. His voice was soft, gentle, too calm. "You hurt me." Jin could not speak. Her mouth was dry, her throat raw. He stepped forward, not walked, glided, and as he came closer, the temperature around her dropped. The flames on the altar bowed inward, shrinking away from him. "I waited," he said. "You broke the thread." She shook her head weakly. I didn't choose this." He knelt beside her. Close, too close. And now she could see his skin was cracked, not like dry wood, but like porcelain. Hairline fractures spidered out from his lips, his temples, his throat, as though something inside had been struggling to escape. "But your blood did," he whispered. "Your grandmother ran, and you came back. That is enough." He reached for her wrist. The red thread still wrapped her skin, but when his fingers touched it, it tightened, as if responding to its master. Her body seized, breath caught in her chest. He leaned closer. "You are nearly ready." "Ready for what?" His eyes searched hers. "To carry me." Jin's stomach turned. "No!" "I gave my soul to the tree. I gave my body to the right, but the final bond was never sealed. You are the last knot." "You're dead!" she spat. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Not anymore." Suddenly his face changed, not in expression, in form. His edges of jaw trembled, and his skin rippled like water. Beneath the porcelain exterior, something pulsed, alive, red, ancient. His features warped into a dozen different faces, his, her grandmother's, hers, then settled back into stillness. He exhaled. The mist followed, and then he whispered, almost lovingly, "Say the vow. Let me in." She screamed and struck him with the only thing nearby, a candlestick. It passed through him. He faded like fog, but not completely. The mist lingered, the cold remained, and her body bore new bruises she couldn't explain. Later, when the sun rose, weak and white, Jin wandered the shrine like a stranger in her own skin. Her reflection now blinked after her. Her shadow now moved slightly out of sync, and when she passed the mirror, her mouth did not smile, but the reflections did. The coffin had returned to the chamber. Inside it now lay her own clothes, folded, washed, waiting. On top of them sat a red comb, an ancient bridal token. Beside it, a note written in her own handwriting. "You will be beautiful."
She was running out of time. Jin Lan felt it in her breath, in her pulse, in the way her shadow no longer followed her unless she was being watched. The veil had returned. The coffin had changed. And every mirror now gave her a face she no longer trusted. Something inside her was shifting. She needed a way out, not just escape, severance. That night, the wind shifted. It carried the smell of incense and rain, wet earth, charred offerings, old prayers whispered through gritted teeth. She sat beneath the coffin tree, hands clenched, lips pale.
She wasn't alone. From the shadows of the forest, he stepped forward. Not Liang Shen. Uncle Liang. His robes were darker now, edges frayed, face gaunt as though he hadn't slept in years. His walking stick no longer tapped. It scraped, dragging behind him like a reluctant promise. "You're still fighting," he said softly, without judgment. She didn't answer. He sat beside her, creaking like old wood. Together they stared at the tree. Its petals had begun to wilt, curling inward as if devouring themselves. This tree was born of a broken ritual, your ancestor, the first bride. Jin turned. "The first?" He nodded. "Before even your grandmother, there was a girl whose name is no longer spoken. She was offered in secret, married to a spirit whose name had been erased from the records. The union was never meant to be, but the rite bound them." "And the tree? It grew from her grave, but it didn't grow roots into the earth. It grew into her lineage." Jin's chest tightened. "And now it wants me?" "It doesn't want. It remembers." He paused. "But there's still a way." She turned fully now, heart lurching. "A way out?" He nodded slowly. "But it is not clean, and it is not kind." "Tell me." Uncle Liang took a deep breath. "You must finish the bond, let it seal, become his bride in form, in blood, and then, before he enters you fully, transfer the curse." "To who?" "To another." She recoiled. "What do you mean?" "The tree doesn't require you. It requires balance, one soul to carry the bond, one vessel to be hollowed out." Her mouth dried. "You want me to sacrifice someone?" "No, I'm telling you the cost of survival." She stood. "So this is what the village has always done. Pick someone else. Pass the curse like an heirloom no one wants to carry." "That's how we've survived," he whispered. "How many have you chosen?" He didn't answer. Jin backed away from him. But even as she turned, deep down, a seed of understanding had already begun to sprout. One life for one life. Balance. The next day, a stranger arrived. A young woman in her early 20s, wide-eyed, smiling. A volunteer from the anthropology department. She said the university had received no updates from Jin for weeks, and they'd sent someone to check on her. She introduced herself as Min. Fresh, curious, innocent. Jin stared at her like one might stare at a candle in a locked room full of smoke. She asked herself, "Would you? Could you?" That night, Min shared a room near the roundhouse courtyard. She spoke of her thesis, of her desire to document vanishing folklore. She reminded Jin of herself, before the veil, before the roots, before the red thread pulled tight. And still, the thought whispered, "If not you, then her. If not her, then no one." She wept in silence. She returned to the shrine and screamed into the hollow dark, "No, there must be another way." But the echo that came back did not mimic her words. It said, "Choose." Later, she found a red comb in Min's room. She hadn't put it there. Neither had Min. She confronted Uncle Liang again. "You're preparing her." He didn't deny it. "You brought her here." "She came on her own, but the tree always sends the thread." "You're monsters. We're survivors." She turned away. That night, she dreamt again of the coffin tree. But this time, she was not wearing the veil. Min was. And beneath the tree, Liang Shen was not waiting for Jin. He was waiting for whoever wore the red. She screamed awake. The mirror across the room showed Min, asleep, wearing a veil that wasn't there. She stood over her for hours, unmoving, unblinking, and inside, the seed twisted deeper into her blood. Roots.
Min hummed as she boiled water for tea. She moved through the courtyard with ease, brushing dust from her notebook, her ponytail swinging, her sandals clicking softly against the stone. She was happy to be here, grateful, curious. She had no idea. Jin Lan watched from the shadows of the roundhouse doorway, arms crossed, heart sinking. It was like watching a child play at the edge of a cliff, unaware that the ground beneath her had already begun to crumble. Min had been here for 3 days, and already the tree had noticed her. At first it was the petals. One drifted into her room at night, then 2, then more. A cluster found pressed between the pages of her field journal, though she swore she hadn't touched the coffin tree. Then the thread appeared, a single strand tied to the handle of her door. Jin had untied it before she woke, burned it, but the next night it returned, wound into her pillow like a whisper. It was choosing her, and Jin hadn't stopped it, not yet. On the 4th night, Jin found herself standing at the altar of the shrine again, staring down at her own reflection in the polished brass bowl. The water inside had gone black. She whispered to it, not to God, to the tree. "Take me instead," she said. "Please." But the reflection shook its head. Not a ripple, a response. It wasn't offering her a way out. It was offering her a trade. Min's laughter echoed through the roundhouse as she unpacked her camera gear. Jin curled her fists, her nails dug crescents into her palms. She returned to Uncle Yang at dawn, pale and shaking. "I won't do it," she said. He looked tired, older than ever. "Then you will die," he said. "I'd rather that than become a murderer." He poured her tea in silence, then placed a small object on the table. A photograph. Min, dressed in the red kippah, veil in place, eyes shut. "It's not murder," he said quietly. "It's balance." Jin tore the photo in half and left, but the image returned to her pocket before nightfall, untorn. That evening, Min knocked gently on Jin's door. She entered with a hesitant smile. "I hope I'm not intruding." "You're not," Jin said, voice hoarse. Min sat beside her on the mat, placing her journal between them. "I found something strange in the archive box. It looks like a wedding registry, and your name's in it." Jin's stomach turned. Min flipped open the ledger. There it was. Jin Lan paired with Liang Shen, written in fresh black ink. Min laughed nervously. "Weird, right? I thought maybe it's a common name, but it's written in simplified characters, not traditional." Jin stayed silent. Min hesitated. "Is something happening here that I should know about?" A long pause. Jin finally whispered, "Yes." Min straightened. "Tell me." Jin's voice broke. "You need to leave. I just got here. You're not safe." "What do you mean?" Jin gripped her hand. Her voice was a whisper of desperation.
They're going to choose you. Choose me for what? Jin opened her mouth to speak and then stopped, because she saw the veil, floating behind men, caught on the wind, and men didn't see it, didn't feel it, didn't know. Jin felt something crack inside her. Later that night, Jin packed Min's things, stuffed them into her bag, left a note, dragged it to the shrine, left it outside. When Min came to find her the next morning, Jin had gone. She had returned to the hill, to the coffin tree, to the roots that had been waiting since before she was born. That evening, Min sat alone in the roundhouse. She never found the note. She found the veil instead, laid across her bed, red, soft, familiar. She didn't remember putting it on, but she wore it in her dream. And the dream wasn't hers. The moon was red again. Not just red, deeper, darker, like dried blood left too long beneath fingernails. It hung low above the coffin tree, swollen and unblinking, casting long, stretched shadows across the roots. The villagers gathered in silence. No one spoke. No one needed to. They knew this night. They had lived it, and they had survived it. Jin Lan walked between them, barefoot, wrists wrapped in red thread, veil lowered, eyes dry. The drums began, slow, deep, hollow. Each beat was a heart giving in. The final wedding had begun. She climbed a hill with deliberate steps, her gown dragged behind her, soaked with morning dew. A lantern swayed in her right hand. In her left, she held nothing, but the air around her clung like fingers. The coffin tree towered ahead. Lit by crimson lanterns, its bark split wide like a wound, and at its roots, the altar. And on the altar, a coffin, its lid already open, waiting. Min stood across from her, eyes wide beneath a half-lowered veil. They had brought her here after all. Her hands trembled. She looked confused, dazed. Jin could see it, the haze around her, the pull of the thread already tightening. Min whispered, "What is this? Why am I—" "I'm sorry," Jin said. Min took a step back. Jin looked to Uncle Liang, who stood between them, arms raised. "Tonight the bond shall be sealed. Tonight the trees shall sleep again. One will stay, one will go." The villagers bowed their heads. The air thickened, the drums quickened. Jin turned to men, voice trembling. "You need to run, right now." "What?" "Go, don't stop, don't look back." Men looked around. The villagers weren't moving. Their eyes were glazed, their mouths whispered things not meant for the living. "Go!" Jin screamed. Men stumbled, then ran, down the path, into the trees. No one followed. The coffin tree groaned. Its petals began to fall. The thread around Jin's wrists caught fire. She didn't flinch. She stepped toward the coffin. "I'm here. You win." The mist around the tree stirred. The wind died. And then he appeared. Liang Shen. He rose from the coffin like smoke, solid but only just. His face was unchanged, but now in the full moonlight she could see the cracks, hairline fractures running down his cheekbones, his jaw, like his body was made of cursed porcelain ready to shatter. He smiled. "I always knew you'd come back." She stepped closer. "Then let's finish this." He raised his hand, and the thread around her wrists pulled tight. The veil drifted down onto her face by itself. And in that moment, everything went still. Time paused, the tree stopped swaying, even the drums fell silent. Only two things moved, her breath and her heart. Then, with a cry that came not from her throat but her soul, Jin reached into her sleeve and pulled the blade. A single ritual knife, bone-handled, passed from her grandmother, meant for this moment. She cut the thread. The knot snapped. The air screamed. Liang Shen's face contorted, eyes wide with betrayal. "You broke the seal!" "No," she whispered. "I refused it." She stepped into the coffin, not as her bride, but as the one who ends the curse. She raised the blade again and stabbed it into the center of the altar. Blood spilled, hers, a sacrifice. The earth shook, the tree wailed. Liang Shen screamed, not in pain, but in disbelief, as his form shattered into dust, pulled into the roots like ash into fire. The thread turned to smoke, the veil to flame, and the moon above began to fade, its red hue draining into the sky like ink in water. Silence, then wind, then nothing. When the villagers awoke at dawn, the coffin tree was bare. No petals, no blood, no bride. Jin was gone. So was Min. So was the thread. But on the altar lay a single paper effigy, folded perfectly, dressed in red, its face blank, its hands open. And in the breeze, the last wedding drum echoed once, then never again. The village never spoke of that night again. Not aloud, not in daylight. The coffin tree no longer bloomed, its branches withered, its bark cracked and dry. The roots that once pulsed with life and ritual now lay dormant, as if asleep, or as if waiting for something that never came. Jin Lan was gone. Some believed she died beneath the altar, offering her life in place of another. Others whispered she had walked between worlds and chosen not to return. The elders claimed the curse had been satisfied, that the bride had fulfilled the vow and severed the thread. But no one touched the tree. No one dared. Min was found at the village edge days later, alone, barefoot, veilless, confused. She remembered nothing of the rituals, nothing of the drums, nothing of the choice that had spared her. She was told she had fallen ill, that Jin had gone ahead. She never found her again. The university closed the research project soon after. Too many files, corrupted footage, photographs that showed things no lens should see, petals in the shape of faces, shadows that didn't match their owners, mirrors that blinked. But Min never forgot the dreams. In them she walked through corridors made of wood and bone. In them she saw Jin, dressed in red, her face pale, eyes soft and endless. She never spoke, but she always stood at the foot of a tree that pulsed like a heart, and behind her, a coffin, always open, always waiting. Years passed. The village emptied. Younger generations moved away. The roundhouse fell into disrepair. The shrine collapsed in a monsoon, and the last Taoist priest was buried with no name marker. But the coffin tree remained. Tourists sometimes found their way to it, backpackers with cameras, seekers of myth. Most left with nothing but blurry photos and mosquito bites. But every few decades, one would go missing. A student, a filmmaker, a wanderer looking for truth in places where truth is better left buried. And when they did, the tree would bloom. Only briefly, only once, one blossom, deep red. And if you followed the petals to the roots, you'd find a coffin. Nothing ornate, just wood, weathered and cracked. And if you looked closely at the grain, if the light hit just right, you'd see a name carved faintly, as though by trembling hands. Sometimes it read, Jin Lan. Other times, Lan Yu. And sometimes, no name at all. Just the thread, frayed, waiting. Because the tree is not evil. The ritual is not cruel. They are only old. Older than love, older than death, older than memory. They are balance. One bride, one coffin, one soul to carry the weight. And somewhere out there, another girl dreams of lanterns and drums. She hums a tune she doesn't remember learning. And when she wakes, a red veil hangs at the foot of her bed. She thinks it's nothing. She thinks it's fabric. But deep in the hills of southern China, beneath the withered branches of a dead tree, a coffin waits with its lid slightly open, just enough for her name to slip in.